Hi guys, Mike in the Woods here, and today we're going to talk about bug-out bags. In this video specifically, I'm going to explain what a bug-out bag is, their purpose, some tips and tricks, and how they fit into the overall philosophy of prepping. However, before we get to explaining what precisely a bug-out bag is, we first need to explain the concept of bugging out. Really, the term bug out or bugging out is just a fancy way of saying getting the hell out of Dodge. It's the act of a hasty retreat in emergency, usually with the insinuation that it was done with preparation in mind. So with that very simple explanation out of the way, you can pretty much guess what a bug-out bag is. It's a bag full of gear and kit for this emergency departure situation. Specifically, a bug-out bag is a self-contained survival kit built to be self-sustaining for the time it takes you to get from point A to point B. This includes things like water, food, first aid, shelter, a sleep system, and anything else you might need. As you may have noticed in that previous statement, the point of a bug-out bag is to get you to a predetermined destination. In other words, you should have a specific location in mind for the situation in which you are forced to bug out, and this is referred to as a bug-out location. This can be things like a cabin in the woods, your cottage, a friend or family member's place, somewhere that is far enough away that whatever local emergency happens, your bug-out location should be well enough away from it. Now, I should specify that a bug-out bag is really only meant to be used during localized emergencies. Things like hurricanes, floods, wildfires, power grid failure, rioting, or anything else that's temporary. When you bug out, the hope is that you'll be able to return home after a period of time. The importance of this definition is that in the event of a larger, more permanent disaster, the types more commonly associated with the doomsday prepper types, there exists a different type of bag for that situation, which is called an inch bag, which stands for I'm never coming home. I'll cover that type of bag in a separate video, but basically, bug-out bags are for short-term emergencies, not large-scale disasters. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about bug-out bag fundamentals and what actually goes into a bug-out bag. As I mentioned, the purpose of a bug-out bag is to get you from point A to point B. So everything that's in a bug-out bag should be, in some shape or another, a tool or supply to help get you to that final destination. Now, obviously, for every person, the exact contents of their bug-out bag will be different, as everything from the time of the year to the route between locations will influence what gear is needed. However, there are 13 fundamental bases that should always be covered. So let's take a look. Number 1 is food. Generally, you want to have enough food to last you until you get to your destination. This should be non-perishable food that you can leave in your kit until it's needed. I advise avoiding canned food due to the added weight and bulk from not only the metal can that it's in, but also the water content in the food itself. Aim for dehydrated food that you can rehydrate when you cook. A lot of people opt for military MREs or backpacking meals, but things like Knorr sidekicks, beef jerky, instant noodles, and things of that nature will do just as well. Number 2, water. First and foremost, remember this: do not underestimate just how heavy water is. Some people opt for having enough water to last them for the entire duration of their bug out, but adds so much weight to their kit. If you have access to water sources all throughout your bug out trip, consider having ways to purify found water instead. Things like purification tablets, filter as you drink setups, or even just the tried and true method of filtering and boiling your water. Although in that case, don't discount how long it takes to boil water and let it cool enough for you to drink. And if you do decide to bring enough water, the general rule of thumb is 2 liters of water per day per person. Number 3, cooking. Both for food and purifying water, you need the ability to cook, and you can't always count on being able to have a campfire. Options here include a gas stove, alcohol stove, or a twig burner stove. Aim for something small, compact, and preferably efficient so you're not wasting valuable time. Obviously, you'll also need a cooking pot or two made of metal, and something that you'd feel comfortable with having right in an open fire if needed. The most popular choices are steel and titanium, but aluminum will do just as fine. Number 4, fire starting. Whether for cooking, for light, or for heat, being able to start a fire is paramount. As fire starting tools are so small, it's a wise idea to have multiple ways of starting a fire. at least 2 of which should work in wet conditions, like if it's raining. Popular choices are lighters, stormproof matches, ferro rods, and, if you know what you're doing, flint and steel. Number 5, shelter. In a bug-out situation, you may, although not necessarily always, find yourself staying outdoors for the night, so obviously you'll need some sort of shelter system. This is most commonly a tent, although be wary of the size and weight. Aim for a backpacker-style tent that's light and small. Preferably for 1 person, but you can get away with a 2-person tent if you need the extra space. Alternatively, if you're more comfortable with this setup, some people opt for a tarp. This can be far more lightweight and compact, but also leaves you exposed to bugs and wind, so beware of the trade-off. Number 6, a sleep system. The obvious part of this is a sleeping bag, and make sure it's one that's rated to the temperatures you'll expect to face. If you opt for a tarp setup, you might benefit from having a hammock to keep you up off the ground, and if you get one with a bug net, that solves the bug problem. Whether you opt for a hammock or to sleep on the ground, one important part of a sleep system setup is a sleeping pad. It's not so noticeable during the searing heat of summer, but during the colder months, you will absolutely freeze if you don't have something separating you from the ground or cold air underneath you. This is usually in the form of a closed cell foam pad, a self-inflating pad, or a manually inflated pad. Do not discount how important these are as part of your sleep system. Number 7, first aid. I would like to state that you don't necessarily need a big fancy first aid kit unless you are medically trained and know what you're doing. A good rule of thumb is that you should know how to use, and the purpose of, everything in your first aid kit. In any case, you should most definitely at least have one, because in these emergency situations, you'll most certainly get some cuts, scrapes, burns, or even something potentially worse like broken bones. And don't discount the addition of digestive medicine, things like stool softeners and stool hardeners, because drinking funky water on the go will play hell with your digestive system. As well, you should obviously include any important medications that you're taking, so that you have those with you as well. Number 8, navigation. This is important even if you are extremely familiar with your planned route between your departure location and your destination. There could be road closures, you might want to avoid all the crowds trying to get out in the same way, you want to avoid major transportation arteries. These are just a few of the reasons why you may be forced to detour. Having a way to navigate to your destination is important for this reason. And the most obvious choice for this is your phone's GPS, but even that is not infallible. Having a map of your province or state, a compass, and some basic navigation skills would be wise here as well. Number 9, light. At night, you will obviously need to be able to see what you're doing, especially if you're forced to camp out in the woods. Having a flashlight or two is always a good idea, as well as some extra batteries for them. A lot of people actually opt for headlamps as it allows them to have their hands free. As well, redundancy here is never a bad idea. Have your main flashlight and then a small, cheap backup if your main one fails or gets lost. Number 10, clothing. Having at least one complete change of clothes is important for either when you get dirty or you get soaked and you need to change out to prevent hypothermia. In addition to this should include extra layers like a puffer jacket that you can add on and take off as needed throughout the day and the night. Number 11, tools. Whether for repairing gear or for camp chores, having some simple tools in your kit is a good idea. Things like a reliable knife, a multi-tool, and duct tape. I would also lump cordage into this category, so things like paracord or mason twine. Something strong enough to support the needed uses like tying off your tarp or tent. Number 12, communication. The obvious one here is your cell phone, so that you can contact loved ones or keep in touch with what's going on. You also have the entirety of the internet at your fingertips with this. You should also have some way to keep your phone charged, whether it be battery banks, solar chargers, or a hand crank charger. Additionally, a small hand crank radio for listening in on emergency channels would not be a bad idea either. Number 13, cash and documents. Unfortunately, you can't always count on the fact of ATMs and the digital infrastructure being up to support you and your financial transactions in the event of a bug-out situation. Assume that all costs will have to be dealt with in cash, so have a good quantity of it tucked in your bag to deal with these situations. Additionally, you should have in there any documentation that you might need, things like your birth certificate, any other identification, and even things like insurance. So there will be other more specific things that you need for your bug out situation, so be sure to think about what you might need that's specific to your situation. Okay, so we've gone through that long but important list of bug out bag fundamentals, so let's take a look at some of the do's when it comes to building your bug out bag. First one is plan for a specific period of time, but have options to extend your trip if needed. Your kit should be self-sustaining for the time it takes you to get from point A to point B, but in the event it takes you longer to get to your bug out location, or you wind up unable to get there at all, have options in your kit to extend your stay. Ways to purify water, ways to hunt and forage for food, so on and so forth. Second item is consider the likely scenarios you'll face. It's admittedly hard to anticipate what emergencies will come up, but consider what might happen in your specific area. Is your area susceptible to earthquakes? Do you live near a nuclear power plant like I do? Are you on the coast of a major body of water? Thinking of and answering questions like this will let you better inform yourself of what situations might come up in your specific circumstance that requires you to bug out. Third item, practice with your bug out bag. It will surprise you how much heavier and uncomfortable your bag is after you've walked around with it for even just 1 kilometer. Practicing with your bag will give you more confidence that you can do the trip in a bug out scenario, and frankly, not testing your bag prior to emergency situation is not only dangerous, it's potentially deadly. And the fourth item, redundancy is important. I mean, don't overdo it, but there should be some overlap in functionality. I want you to remember this motto: 2 is 1, 1 is none. If any piece of kit fails or get lost, should be something else in your kit that can cover for it. Multiple ways to start a fire, purify water, light sources, so on and so forth. Alright, so we've given you things to consider to do with your kit, but now let's take a look at things you should not do. So the first one, don't have cheap gear that will break. For some gear, getting it from the dollar store is fine, but for others, especially gear that's critical to your survival, you should not cheap out on it. I know it might be tempting to spend $30 on a sleeping bag instead of $200, but then on your first trip, you find out that it's nowhere near as warm as it claims, and it breaks on the first night. Don't cheap out, go for quality. Number 2, don't go for military-style bags. I know it might be tempting, and I myself am guilty of this one, but instead try to go for more of a backpacker-style bag, as not only will it be far more comfortable, but it will also make you less of a target in a situation where you're surrounded by thousands of people who have no idea what the fuck they're doing and are sorely underprepared. Number 3, don't get the bag prior to getting your gear. Get the bug out gear first, and then get the bag. That way, you get a bag that's perfectly sized to fit your gear, and you don't find yourself with either a half-filled bag or a bag that's too small to fit all of your kit. Number 4, don't assume your trip will be entirely wilderness-based. If you're like me, you actually live in a relatively urban environment, so don't assume you'll have places to pitch a tent or set up a campfire, or even assume that you'll be sufficiently away from other people. Keep these things in mind and really study the corridor of your trip from your bug out origin to your destination. Well, I know it's a lot of information to take in, but I cannot stress enough the importance of having a bug out bag. It's not about assuming the world is going to go to shit. It's about assuming that the likelihood of any sort of localized disaster happening is high enough where spending a bit of time and money to build yourself a survival insurance policy is worth it. Doesn't even have to be all at once. Start simple and build it up over time. As well, nobody expects you to know exactly what you'll need right off the bat. Look on YouTube for other bug out bag teardowns to see exactly what they have in their kits. I'll link the teardown video of what I have in mind in the video description below, so be sure to check that out. Additionally, I'll also have some Amazon affiliate links to some useful bug out gear that I personally use and recommend. Thanks for watching, guys, and I know it's a lot to take in if you're new to the idea of bug out bags. If you have any questions, absolutely leave them in the comments section below, and I or someone else knowledgeable will for sure try our best at answering it. If you liked the video, please share, like, subscribe, as I aim to post all sorts of outdoors related videos here, and be sure to check out my other videos. Until next time, guys.